DW Inside Europe.
Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Sini in Germany. On today's programme, riots, race and a reckoning. Days of violence rock the UK.
It's a scene that makes you hold your breath, dread what's next. Get them out. And then the moment those inside feared the most.
Also on Inside Europe, Ukraine's will to win at the Olympics. And the dangers posed by Russia's ghost fleet. Those stories and more coming up on the programme. It's been a dark week for the United Kingdom. Racist and anti-immigration riots spread across the country, quelled only on Wednesday night by thousands of peaceful counter-protesters. In the worst cases, rioters have attacked police with bricks, smashed in people's homes and assaulted members of the public. The police say age-old phobias are being inflamed by social media, with extreme right-wing influencers spreading hatred online, even organising spontaneous riots. Hundreds of people have been arrested, and the government has deployed a standing army of officers to British communities. But though the violence has been criticised, many have sympathy with the rioters' concerns over immigration. From the Brexit politician Nigel Farage to the multi-billionaire social media owner Elon Musk, thousands have taken to social media to post anti-immigration comments. Our reporter Dan Ashby was on the scene in the aftermath of one of the worst riots, where a hotel housing immigrants was set on fire. He sent this report on the week in which Britain faced a reckoning over race and racism.
They are angry, they are armed, and in the worst of ironies, draped in British flags. It's a scene that makes you hold your breath, dread what's next. Because in Rotherham, in the north of England, it's obvious many of the 700 men and women are about to do something terrible. They have come to this hotel on purpose. It's known to house asylum seekers. And from the rooms above, people stare through windows, trapped as the anger swells below. Police try tackling men to the ground, but the rioters are emboldened. They throw bricks and wooden stakes. Their shouts become louder. Get them out! Get them out! Get them out. And then the moment those inside feared the most. The sound of glass shattering, rioters overcoming police. Hundreds of men, some armed, storm inside. Nobody left to stop them. Flames erupt. A bonfire in a large bin is rolled against the hotel. It is a moment to make Britain choke in shame. The idea, the risk, that refugee families might be about to be burned alive. Thank goodness they did not. In the end, the police broke the rioters, but the morning after, it all seems even more senseless. Right now, men in orange suits are carrying out furniture and throwing them away, I guess because they're damaged, destroyed or covered in glass, the debris and shattered windows all over the floor. There must be at least 30 to 40 police officers around the area and a huge window smashed in, looking into a room. It must have been quite terrifying. The refugees have been moved on, but many of the families living nearby were also swept up in it.
As I turned round, about 200 come from our house and I had to walk through them all. It was a bit frightening, but...
Yeah, and I guess I didn't realise it was so close. Your kids would have been seeing that and seeing the fires and...
We tried to keep it, little one's only 5, but it broke my heart because last night Her mum allows her to just text her auntie, and she'd text her auntie and just put, "I love you, I'm so scared." And she's 9. And it broke my heart to see that message, you know.
Oh my goodness, that she was that scared that she's writing. That's horrible.
Yeah.
But this community epitomises a wound in Britain that is beginning to fester. They may deplore the violence that came here, but they don't welcome the refugees either.
It's not fair to people. A woman goes around the lake on her own, you get followed. They're whistling at little kids. I've got an 8-year-old granddaughter that wanted to come yesterday and said, "Can I write on a sign, please go home, we want to feel safe." That's an 8-year-old child.
Really? She wanted to write that and come here?
She wanted to come and she wanted to write that on a sign. And it's every time you don't feel safe.
That lingering fear and frustration with immigrants, sometimes legitimate, other times racist, is present in communities across the UK. And the extreme right has taken this moment to put a Tinder keg into it. The riots began after 3 girls were murdered and extremists falsely claimed an immigrant was behind the attack. That incident was the spark, but not the cause. Far-right extremists were waiting for a moment, organised by influencers with millions of followers who spread racist lies, and now flag up mosques, hotels, even law firms worthy of attack. But do the riots underscore growing frustration that even the police can't quell? There's one voice, never far from the headlines, making that case.
What Starmer doesn't understand, and when he says, "I'm going to stop the far right," what he doesn't understand is the general feeling of dissatisfaction that has been out there in this country growing for years.
Brexiteer Nigel Farage's anti-immigration party won 14% of the vote in last month's election, and he says only a ban of mass migration will stop the cause of the riots.
I talked in the general election about societal breakdown. What I meant by that were communities being split apart, people not even recognising the centres of some of our towns and cities as even being vaguely English anymore.
But many millions disagree with Farage and blame Britain's long history of racism as the root cause.
This riot is, at its essence, a consequence of the failure of the British establishment in confronting the monsters of history.
Udit Takri lived as an immigrant near Rotherham for 6 years. He was verbally and physically abused about his race multiple times.
I'm triggered because it brings back horrible memories of the abuse I have experienced.
Like thousands of others posting online, the riots make him feel scared to live or visit the UK.
I was scared. I was just scared, and I continue to be scared.
He believes racism is rampant in British life, enabled by the ruling classes, and the riots are an extreme expression of it.
The average white Briton simply does not understand how race it is entirely constructed.
As this report was filed, the riots continued, and so did the soul-searching for answers. But when it comes to the violence, the attempted burning of families, the stamping on people's heads, the fear, Udit has a warning. Perhaps there's no rationality to be found.
The quest to look for human logic in this is like beating your head on a wall. There is no logic to it.
That report from Dan Ashby. And as Dan mentioned, the riots were seemingly triggered by the shocking murder of 3 small girls in the city of Southport in the northwest of England. But as our reporter Lash Bavanga writes in this postcard from nearby Manchester, nothing happens in a vacuum.
It's been nearly 2 weeks since a 17-year-old boy entered a children's dance class, killed 3 little girls and severely injured many more. We still know nothing of his motive and little about his background other than that he was born in the UK to Rwandan parents. At the end of that shocking day, I, like so many others, wanted to understand what had happened. X, formerly known as Twitter, was already full of conspiracy theories and a growing hatred directed at groups who for many have become the go-to scapegoats, immigrants and particularly Muslims. A Muslim-sounding name was being widely shared. Like most of the wild theories bandied about, it was false. Yet the next day, just hours after the grief-stricken Southport community had held a dignified vigil, a violent mob descended to attack the local mosque and then the police, trying to quell the riot, many of whom had run into danger to try to stop the knife attacker just the day before. The riots have since spread across English cities and to Belfast in Northern Ireland. In perhaps the most shocking incident so far, a mob tried to block the exit and set fire to a hotel housing asylum seekers. When I moved to this country nearly 30 years ago, it appeared to me a successful multicultural society far more advanced than my native Norway, which in the 1990s was still extremely homogeneously white. This week, people I know here have been scared to walk to work because they have darker skin. And yet I am not entirely surprised. These riots, shocking as they are not happening in a vacuum. As humans, we seem hardwired to fear the unknown and quick to blame the others for everything that goes wrong. Vote-hungry politicians across Europe have turned immigration into a central policy plank. Successive UK governments have talked about creating a hostile environment for so-called illegal immigrants and have used terms like a flood or an invasion. The outgoing Conservative government made stopping asylum seekers from arriving on boats across the Channel one of their top priorities during this year's election. Such language is endlessly amplified in a largely unregulated social media environment because it generates income for the owners. Why else would Elon Musk, owner of X, with 193 million followers, himself be peddling conspiracy theories and literally egging the violent rioters on here in the UK? To be clear, this country, like most other European countries, depends on immigrant labour, not least in the healthcare sector, to look after an ageing population. The fresh Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer, a former Director of Public Prosecutions, has promised swift justice for those found guilty of violent disorder. Arrests and sentencing have already begun. This will probably quell the violence for now, but the underlying hatred of the others, fueled by political rhetoric and click-hungry tech billionaires, will not go away. Maybe we should all do as the locals in Southport did on the day after the riots there. Go out, tidy up, help repair the mosque, make tea and talk to each other. Lars Bevanger, DW, Manchester.
Still to come on the programme, Ukraine's will to win at the Olympics and the dangers posed by Russia's ghost fleet. I'm Helen Seeney in Germany and you're listening to Inside Europe. Ukraine has sent its smallest Summer Olympics team ever to the Paris Games, just 140 members. The war against Russia has killed hundreds of the country's most promising athletes and made it difficult for surviving ones to train and compete. Still, Ukraine has scooped up a number of Olympic medals in the French capital. Lisa Bryant reports from Paris.
One of the walls of Ukraine's Olympic Pavilion here in northeastern Paris carries a gigantic sign, the will to win. It's impossible not to think about the bigger battle.
It's very important to show all over the world Ukrainian resilience, the Ukrainian will to win.
That's Ukraine's acting sports minister, Matvey Bidny, a former champion bodybuilder.
They have a no-precedent like Ukraine now to be in a full-scale war with a huge aggressor, with a huge army, and take part in a big sports event, in a big team under our flag. And what's very important is that Russian flag isn't here.
Russia was barred from competing in the Paris Games. Just over a dozen Russians are competing as individual neutral athletes. Ukraine is paying a bigger price. Minister Bidney says more than 3,000 athletes and trainers have taken up weapons since the war broke out in 2022. Nearly 500 have died. This Olympic pavilion, known as Ukraine House, is filled with reminders of the conflict, like this band performing, backdropped by images of the war. Or a poster of a partially destroyed stadium in the northeastern city of Kharkiv.
A lot of sports facilities damaged, more than 520 sports facilities damaged or destroyed, totally destroyed. In winter, when the Russian rockets hit our energetics, the temperature of the sports environment was something like a 0 degree in Celsius.
Judo athlete Bohdan Yadov's father serves in Ukraine's army.
My father defends our country. I really want to see my father because 2 years I didn't see my father, so it's really hard to live in war. I'm always pray for this war ends soon.
Yadov lost his Olympic match. He's now rooting for the rest of Team Ukraine.
But I'm really proud in this time represented my country, and I'm really proud to be Ukrainian.
Badminton player Polina Barova lives and trains in Italy, but her homeland isn't far from her mind. She sang this song for the audience at Ukraine House.
It's always very hard mentally to prepare, to understand, to accept, and to go and fight, because especially when you go on court, you want to show the best for Ukraine, you want to make country proud, you want to make people proud.
Politicians, but also fans from all over, are visiting the pavilion. Jesper Lindholt lives in Kyiv. His Danish-Ukrainian family lives outside the country.
So I'm very happy to be in this place and see how they also carry the message, the two-sided message that it's important to be here. Although people are fighting, it's important to be part of the world community, while still fighting on behalf of world community. Ukraine is fighting.
Ukraine's team will be heading home after the Paris Games wrap up Sunday, back to a war that doesn't seem likely to end anytime soon. Lisa Bryant, DW, Paris.
After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the European Union and the G7 sought to reduce Moscow's war budget by sanctioning its oil exports. It's now illegal for Russia to sell oil for more than $60 per barrel, and for companies to provide insurance to transport oil selling for more than that price. To get around these restrictions, the Kremlin is using deceptive means that could be dangerous for countries bordering the Baltic Sea. Terry Schultz reports.
Floating disasters just waiting to happen. That's how Greenpeace's Suna Scheller describes the decrepit vessels Russia is increasingly using to get around sanctions on its oil exports imposed over its war in Ukraine. These ships are often called a dark fleet, a shadow fleet, or a ghost fleet, because they're hiding the fact that they often aren't seaworthy, carry flags and insurance from countries which don't observe international sanctions, and are often operated by inexperienced crews who don't know the area. Here's Suna Scheller.
These oil tankers normally have a lifespan of maybe 10, 15 years, and then they're worn out, and then they're sent for scraps. But the whole shadow fleet is basically made up of these oil ships that were meant to be scrapped, but has now been bought up and is still sailing right. Some of them are 15 years, some of them are 20, some of them are more than 25 years old, and that is not a proper age for an oil tanker carrying 100,000 tons of oil. So it's extremely much more risky.
The Danish straits are so narrow in some places that you can see Sweden on the other side. They're international waters, so Russia has the right to sail here. But there's already been a collision with empty tankers, Scheller says, and next time might not be so lucky.
And it's just a matter of time when it's going to happen again. It is very obvious because it's just out there. It's just passing by our waters on a daily basis with this increased extreme risk associated to it. And you just hope every day you go in and I check my tracking and what else I do following this subject, that it's not the news about an accident that hits you. And no one has the capacity to clean this up. The Danish Navy doesn't have it. No one would expect the Russian government to come and clean it up. The responsible company can often not be found. Maybe the insurance is fraudulent and they will not come and clean it up, right? So we're left with the bill. We're left with the cleanup.
Some experts say the shadow fleet now carries 4/5 of all Russia's exports of crude oil under the regulatory radar. Jacob Kjøksborg, a reporter with the investigative journalism outlet Danwatch in Copenhagen, has been exposing the fleet's murky business practices.
Lots of them, they've been bought recently by companies in India or Dubai or places like this. And if you look up the addresses of the owners, you'll find them living in supermarkets and you'll find them in older building complexes in Mumbai, where if you go to Google Maps and see, there's not a shipping company there. I think it's very interesting that you have this huge fleet of oil tankers just working in Denmark every day, but nobody knows who's controlling them. And I think we need to get to the bottom of who is controlling them.
Now the Danish government pledges an international coalition will try to force better practices on the fleet. But how? Sanctions experts like Benjamin Hilgenstock at the Kyiv School of Economics Institute believe the key is to more aggressively target ships known to be flouting their obligation to have credible oil spill insurance.
So the vessel would be identified as property of a sanctioned entity, but most importantly, anyone interacting with this vessel or the cargo that it carries could face enforcement action themselves. And this means the buyers of the oil that it transports, any port that interacts with the vessel, if there is a ship-to-ship transfer, anyone who owns or operates the vessel that the cargo is transferred to, importantly, financial institutions that conduct the transactions behind this entire trade, all of them ultimately face enforcement action.
That recommendation goes further than the European Union's latest sanctions on some shadow fleet vessels, banning them from European ports and services. But the measures can't physically block the ships from sailing through the international waters like the Danish Straits. Whether and how to do that is highly controversial. Here's Peter Viggo Jacobsen, an analyst with the Royal Danish Defence College.
The problem is that there's not that many good options, because you can either make an environmental case saying that these ships who are now passing through the Danish Straits are in so poor condition that they are creating an environmental hazard, and therefore we can stop them. You can also go after them and say they don't have insurance and therefore they should not be allowed to go through the Danish Straits. I just don't see that as a solution, because, okay, so you can say this ship does not have insurance. Now it's approaching the Danish Straits. What are we going to do? And are we willing to go out and intercept and stop this ship? Because if we are, then we are in the crosshairs of Moscow saying, okay, Denmark, just stop the ship. So we'll just let the next ship going through, make sure that it has an accident so that they have a huge pollution in Danish waters, and then Denmark can do the cleanup, and good luck with that.
Moscow has already threatened Denmark with retaliation just for considering a response to the Dark Fleet. But without one, billions of dollars in what could be illegal oil revenue will continue flowing through European waterways to the Kremlin war chest. Terry Schultz, DW, Copenhagen.
To keep up to date with news from around Europe, head to our website dw.com. And if you have any feedback on the show, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line at insideeurope@dw.com. We're always pleased to hear from you. This is Inside Europe, and I'm Helen Sini in Germany.